we're going to be talking about systems, and we've started this month with an interview with Eric Smith about systems and systems. That he's an expert and actually a consultant as well as a pastor and a CEO of a business. So very wise man. So you haven't listened to that podcast, you're going to want to listen to that. But as we talk about systems, I want to break down what a system is first, and then how to build one effectively, because I think a lot of people misunderstand systems, or they have their preconceived ideas of what a system is or what systems are not. And, like Heidi said, systems won't guarantee your organization will grow, but faulty systems are definitely going to stop organizations from growing. And so having an effective system is vital. And there's certain bends to certain personalities that like systems, and other personalities that definitely do not. And organizations tend to work toward the bend of the personality of the leader on how much they, emphasis they put on systems or not. But I think regardless, there's some benefits. There's huge benefits to having effective systems. And I think it's vitally important for every organization to have a system and make sure that we design a system. And so I wanted to clarify what one is first, and what a system is, and what is effective, and then make it as simple as possible for all of us, because a lot of times some personalities and some leaders kind of stay away from the conversation about systems or diving into it, because they automatically assume that systems are complex or have to be complex. And so it becomes overwhelming and we don't know where to begin. So I want to strip it back as basic as we possibly can in defining it. So it kind of eliminates that in, being intimidated by what a system is, and then understanding what it is at its core really helped me anyway, begin to bring clarity to and know whether a system is working or not working. So if you're taking notes, I'm going to give you 4 points to build an effective system. The first 2 points are really going to be defining what a system is, and then the next 2 points are going to be basically how to kind of evaluate and set them up. So point number 1 in how to build an effective system is you want to, number 1, design a clearly defined process. So you want to design a clearly defined process. And the emphasis on that one is it's got to be clear. Without clarity, there's going to be complexity. Without clarity, there's going to be confusion. Without clarity, no one's going to be, when in a point of confusion, or no one's going to be able to confidently step forward or be able to move the organization forward, or their responsibilities, your staff, whatever it might be. And they're not going to be, your volunteers are not going to be able to confidently make the right decisions unless the process is clearly defined. So step 1 is having a clearly defined process. How to define a clear process, I think, is important. Clarity is the ability of the process to be communicated and understood by the people, right? It's not a process that can be communicated and clearly understood by the leader. I think that's a mistake that we often make as leaders, is that it's clear in our mind, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's clear in our team's mind. And so you want to be able to, clarity is the ability of the process to be communicated and by other people, by the volunteers. You want the people on your staff to be able to communicate with clarity what the system is. You want your volunteers to be able to communicate clearly what the system is. And you want them, in order for them to clearly communicate it, they have to clearly understand it. So I think it's so important that for us as leaders, that we really are put an emphasis on bringing clarity, not just to ourselves, not just to our customers, but to everybody that we're responsible for, everybody that's working for us, that they can not only understand what the system is or the process is, but they can also articulate it with clarity. So that's part of that. You bring clarity. And so it's the leader's responsibility to define much more than just the mission or the purpose, which is the why. The leader also must define the vision, what the organization needs to do, but also in focusing on systems, leaders must also define the process or the how. And so my question for you is, as leaders, whether it's a business leader, a church leader, or not-for-profit leader, that you want to be able to ask this question: how's our how? Right? So is our how, we understand our mission, we understand our vision, but do we understand our process and how we're going to accomplish our mission, how we're going to accomplish our vision? So how's the how? I think a book that really helped me kind of grasp in my world, in the church world, the value of systems is Rick Warren's book, The Purpose-Driven Church. And one of the things, and I read it way back when, I think it came out in the late 90s. And in the book, one of the things that he did is he created these 5 concentric circles. And for Rick Warren, what he said is, this is the process, this is his how. And it was so crystal clear that he wrote it in a book. It was crystal clear that not only his church got it, but pastors all around the world began to take those concentric circles and begin to implement them into their own churches. And what it was clear was the outside circle was the community. And he said, this is in the business world, this would be your customer, or the target community that your business is operating in, or the target community that you're trying to market to. That's your community, the people in your neighborhood or in your city, but it's that aren't yet customers. That's the kind of the community. Then his next circle was, in church terms, he used the word congregation, which is, or the crowd, I believe it was. And the crowd was those who would be kind of a first time, visitor. And in the business world, that circle would be your shopper. So you'd have your target community. The circle inside of that one would be your, a browser or a shopper, somebody that's kind of checking out your product or your business and just kind of scoping it out. Whether that business is online, you got viewers, somebody that's online and they're checking you out, and deciding whether or not they want to purchase or be involved. That's your shopper. Then you want to have the next concentric circles, like, well, this would be the first time buyer. So this is somebody that is going to actually, attend for the first time, buy for the first time, make a commitment, volunteer for the first time, whatever that might be. That's the next step. And then the circle inside would be, a return customer, or in the church world, this would be, those who are, now committed to the church. Your return customers, they're coming back and back. In the business world, there's a big difference. A lot of companies are very good at getting the first time buyer, but then what really drives the success is having return customers, where you have a satisfied customer so that they're going to want to return and purchase again. And then the circle inside would be, the core, or the loyal to the brand customer. And I think there's a number of companies that have mastered this loyal to the brand. One of the ones that comes to mind, of course, is Harley Davidson. The fact that people are willing to tattoo a company's brand on their body is probably loyalty. Can you imagine tattooing Coca-Cola on? I mean, it's just like, that's next level commitment, that people are willing to do that. There's other ones. Another company that's done a loyal to brand great job is Apple. It's a company that people are, loyal to a fault. That doesn't matter. They're Apple people. They're going to buy and buy and buy and buy. And they're not just, I've seen Apple stickers on cars, bumper stickers on cars, and you're thinking, why are you advertising your computer on the back of your car? Like, it's interesting, but these companies, whether you're a fan of them or not, have created loyalty at another level to their company. So when you look at the concentric circles, what you're seeing is the outside circle moving into the smallest circle in the middle is a greater level of commitment, right? So you start with your community, and your target audience, And then you've got those who are browsing or shopping, and then you've got your first-time buyers, and then you got your return customers, and then you got your loyal to the brand. And the bigger circle is going to be the broader audience. The narrow ones are going to be your smaller audience. But really, what that's doing is whatever your organization needs to do is having that clearly defined process, which I thought Rick Warren did brilliant at, is saying, okay, here's your target, here's the next level, here's the next level, and clearly defining what the process was is hugely important for defining a system, which leads us to number 2, is that what is next important in building an effective system is creating movement. Okay, so what that means now is that we're going to have a clearly defined process or clearly defined steps, and defining what those, either through the concentric circles or through table and chairs, or what we've done, or through I've seen people where they put a piece of paper on the floor, and then they're saying the next big step, and put the next piece of paper, and what's the next step. You want to be able to create movement now through levels of community. You want to be able to create movement from the community to the shoppers. You want to create movement from the shoppers to the purchasers. You want to create first-time buyers. You want to create movement from the first-time buyers to the return customers. You want to create movement from the return customers to the loyal to the brand, customer. And it's all about creating movement. An effective system is creating movement, and movement is the sequential steps in the process that causes people to move to the greater area of commitment. And in reality, as leaders, what our job is now is to focus on that movement and creating systems or handoffs from one level of commitment to the next level of commitment, and developing a system that is going to create movement to levels of commitment. So what I think is important to understand is that in relay races, if you watch the Olympics and you see the relay race, the relay race is a team of 4, and the teams that win aren't necessarily the ones that have the 4 fastest runners. The teams that often win in the relay race is the ones that had the smoothest handoffs between exchanges between one runner to the next. And if there's races can be lost with a faulty handoff. In the same way, in businesses, we can have the best product on the market, but if we don't have a healthy handoff, to the customer of that product, then the system, it doesn't matter how good your product is, the handoff you're going to lose the race. So it's about when creating movements and systems in these concentric circles and defining the process. It's great to have a defined process, but you have to be able to have clear movements, focus on the handoff from one to the next. So what is the program, now that you're going to use to target the community or the customer that you want to reach? So this would be, obviously, most companies would take this and saying, we're going to have a very strategic marketing plan. The best companies know who their audience is, know what demographic they're trying to reach, which personality they're trying to reach. They break it down as clearly in defining their customer to the age, to the sex, to the wealth or the prosperity of them, or whatever it might be. They will break down and get very, very clear, and the more clear they are, that's the clearly defined process on who their customer is, the more targeted they're going to be toward the community they're marketing, and that is going to be an effective handoff system. And so we can evaluate that and saying, okay, are we effectively reaching the people that we want to target and reach? And is there movement now from the community to shoppers? And so be able to determine whether or not we have a number of new shoppers. If we have lots of new shoppers, first timers coming by, then we know, okay, the system must be working. There's movement. But if we have a lot of first time shoppers, but they're not purchasing, we have a systems problem, because there's the baton got dropped somewhere in the handoff between getting them from that circle to the next one. So now we have to evaluate the system, right? What creates movement from the handoff in the shopper to the purchaser. So what do we need to do to help have a shopper want to purchase? So this is systems like stores will use and malls will use and different things, where they will position certain things that they want you to buy, or that you're going to be most tempted to buy to make that first purchase. They're going to position and situate the store in such a way that you're going to make that first purchase, because if they know if you make that first purchase, you might be willing to go in a little bit deeper and make the second purchase. So they will develop a system that's going to get the shoppers to make the next level of commitment, which is purchasing. So if you've got lots of first-time guests or lots of people shopping for the first time, but they're not buying, we've got a systems problem. We need to reevaluate and work on what we need to do. But let's say you're successful and that handoff's good. You have first-time buyers. Do they come back? And are they return customers? Right? And if they're return customers, now we're focusing on the handoff between the first-time buyer to a return customer. And that then we evaluate the system and the clarity of the system that is going to make a first-time buyer want to come back. So this is where, a lot of companies will focus on customer service and making sure that we're treating the customer properly, and that they're given high levels of respect and different things. There's something that's going to entice them, certain programs that are going to entice them to want to buy again. Right? So that's creating the next handoff to the next level. Then how do we get a return customer to become loyal to the brand? Right, and that's where a lot of companies drop the ball. I'll give you an example of a few that are good at it. So what did Harley Davidson and what did Apple do to create loyal to the brand customers? Well, one of the things that Apple did, for instance, was they spent an awful lot of money, and Steve Jobs was extremely emphatic about doing this. But when a lot of people, I'm one of them as well, keep the boxes that their phones come in or that their computers come in, all the rest of it. He put an enormous amount of extra, expense into the packaging, right? That people were, and they put the stickers in there, into the box, all the extra little expenses that other companies don't do. They put into there because they were creating this brand, or they were creating this desire for return customers. They're creating loyalty. Something that what people will be proud of, to be, to own and to be a part of. They created these little systems, these little programs that were meant to make somebody loyal to the brand. So each one of these, and for Harley, they created a culture around their motorcycles. They marketed in such a way that they're creating a culture around, what the Harley owner is, and they're tough, they're bikers, they're whatever it might be. They created this to where people feel like, man, I got to tattoo that on my body to show that I'm tough. It's a company, it's a corporate logo. Like, what's the deal? Yet they did such a great job in the handoff from a return customer to creating loyalty to a brand. And so that is something where we look at it and clearly defining the process, but also asking, is there movement? And wherever you see a stoppage in movement, you have a systems problem. And for me, that was one of the things that helped me clearly understand systems more than anything. Is like, systems are just simply movement. It's creating movement. And if it's movement to the next level of commitment. In the church world, like, who are we? We want to reach our community. We want someone to check out our church, whether that's online or whether that's in person the first time. We want them to then have such an experience that they come back. And then when they come back, we want them to be committed. And then we want them to be part of the core. And we want to create movement. And we want to be able to put our programs in such a way, with clarity and with simplicity, in such a way that there's a clear next step, which is about creating movement. And clarity is what is the clear next step for the customer, or for the attendee, or for the volunteer. What's the clear next step? And that's defining the process. That's also making sure that there's movement. And then once you create movement, put your programs in that sequential order of this program is designed to create the movement to that next level. That's what it's designed for. What also is important is you want to have a clear entry point to your process. What's the clear first step? So in the church world, is the clear next step the website, or which is becoming more and more important? Is the clear next step, walking inside the church building the first time? For the businesses, is the clear next step walking into the organization or shopping online? What's the clear entry point to the process? And a lot of companies are unclear on that entry point. And if you're unclear, I guarantee you the customer is even more fuzzy in what that is, and they're less likely to jump in. So again, how to build effective systems. Number one, design a clearly defined process. Number two is create movement. Okay. Number three then is now align all of your departments, staff, and volunteers around the same simple process. Okay. So three is align your department, staff, and volunteers around the same, that's important, the same simple process. So once you have clarity to the process, once you can see, you put the programs in sequential order and so that we can create movement, now you want to align all of your departments, all of your staff, all of your volunteers around the same simple process of increasing greater levels of commitment and creating movement to greater levels of commitment within the organization. And I'd implore you to resist complexity, pursue simplicity, right? Well, we don't need to have 5 steps in between each level of commitment. We want to have one, if at all possible, and creating one simple step and align everything within that simple process, and making sure that we can create that clear. That's important. That's the clarity thing. Next movement, next handoff, next step to a greater level of commitment, and align, your marketing department saying you're targeting this audience. You want to align your follow-up. You want to align your volunteers. What part of the movement, what part of the sequence are they in? And then fourthly, you want to narrow your focus. So you want to align all your departments, and then you want to narrow your focus. And both of these kind of work, alignment and focus work, is you want to have to do less if you want to grow more. And so sometimes you're going to have to eliminate what potentially works, and what is presently working to what potentially works best. So sometimes you have to eliminate the good to have the best. And that's narrowing the focus. And narrowing the focus and cutting things sometimes creates more clarity. What's also important with alignment, and focus is measurement. You're not going to be able to manage what you don't measure. And so in order, again, taking our concentric circles, if we look at it saying, how many first-time shoppers has our business had in the last month? If you don't know that number, or you have no way of tracking that number, you're not going to be able to manage that system effectively, because you're going to be it felt like we had this many first-time guests. It felt like we had this many first-time shoppers. It felt busier this month than normal. But if you don't know, you're not going to be able to properly manage that sequential handoff and know whether the system is working or not. So you want to be able to, when you're aligning department staff and volunteers, you want to be able to align measurements as well. Focus on measurements and go, okay, we should know how many are in our community that we're trying to reach. What's our target? What's our target audience? If your target audience for your business is senior citizens, you should know in your 30-mile radius how many senior citizens are in our area that are our potential community of reaching. If your organization's wanting to, grow with, teenagers, you should know how many teenagers are there. If you want to know, you should know what the size of your community is. And then you should know how many first-time volunteers, first-time shoppers, first-time attendees we've had in the last month. You should know that, because then you can see month after month whether or not your system is being effective And sometimes you'll see, well, that number's been declining for months. We probably have a systems problem because our movement is decreased. So if it's increased, we know our systems are working. How many of our first-time shoppers are actually first-time buyers? We should know that, right? And is there a way that we can track that? And if we can track that, then we can know that our system is working and that we're having enough first-time buyers. How many of our first-time buyers have been return customers and come back and have been greater commitment? We should know how many of our buyers are return customers and find a way to do that. How many are loyal? We should know that. And again, if you know that number, it's going to be easier to manage because you're going to be able to see the effectiveness of the handoff, and you'll also be able to see where the baton is being dropped. And then when you see, well, man, we've got lots of first-time buyers, but we don't have a whole lot of return. We got a systems problem. What are we going to do? Maybe it's our customer service. We're going to focus this next season on narrowing our focus and aligning our departments to make sure that we can fix that system so that we can create and keep the movement. So when it comes to focus, the more you focus each environment or circle or department, the more you focus each environment, the greater the relevance. The more you focus each environment, the better the connection, right? Because if there's people aren't sure where to connect or how to connect, they're not going to connect. So the more focused you are, the better the connection. The more focused each environment is, the higher the quality. You're going to be able to deliver more. If you do too much, you're going to do too much at good. But if you do a few, you might be able to do great, right? So the more you focus each environment, the higher the quality. The more you focus each environment, the stronger the impact, right? So focus is vital. And focus really is the commitment to abandoning everything that falls outside of the simple process. If there's something the organization is doing that doesn't create movement to greater levels of commitment, then you have to ask, why are we doing it? If it's not helping, well, we're just doing it because every other company does it. Yeah, but they probably don't know why they're doing it either. Focus is really the commitment to abandon anything that falls outside of the simple process of creating movement to the next level of commitment. So to sum it all up, how to build effective systems is clearly define a process, design a clearly defined process, which is your next steps. What's next? What's the next level of commitment in our organization? Right? And create movement. So in that next step, what is the handoff in between this level of commitment to this level of commitment? And I want to create movement there. And then are we aligned? Our departments aligned, our staff aligned, our volunteers aligned, around the same simple process of anything out of order. And then let's narrow the focus. What can we eliminate that is not helping us be effective in creating movement? So there's just a little summary, little teaching on systems. I hope that helps. And I think now I'm going to hand it over to Heidi, and we're going to go into a Q&A time.
Awesome, thank you. I think this is a really important conversation, especially as our world moves faster and we're bombarded with new tools and productivity hacks daily. And one of the things that you said that really stood out to me was to choose what potentially works best over what is presently working. And I think that's a big differentiator when we're reviewing the effectiveness of our system. So good. So we've got a few minutes left to open up the conversations for a few questions or comments. And I know that Tim already posted one in our chat. So Tim, why don't you ask your question of Kelly? Oh, you're muted. Oh, maybe his mic is not working.
Oh,
all right, I'll ask it for you. Okay, I'll ask it for you, Tim. So Tim asked, what are some good telltale signs to distinguish between what is good and what is best when it comes to narrowing your focus?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot of times What we focus on that is good is something that at one time was great, and was the best system, and then we become loyal to it because at one time was best, and at one time it was good. But if we find ourselves making excuses for why we're keeping something, or keeping something going, or we keeping a department, or we find ourselves making excuses over, a system that we've done, we've always done it this way, or this used to work this way, and we just got, if we start finding ourselves making excuses, we probably have something that at one point was great, but is now we're having to defend it. It is probably now good. So I think that's one of the telltale signs for me anyways. I start paying attention to, where are we making excuses for someone or something that we're doing on a regular basis, and then going, that's good. I'm also, I want to caution that sometimes, and my personality is one that is probably guilty of this a lot, is that sometimes I get distracted easy, or I find something new and shiny and flashy, and I think that's going to be best, and we're going to abandon. So I jump too quickly to there's a better way, and then what happens is that violates, by jumping too quickly to something that you assume is going to be greater. You violate the clearly defined process, right? You violate the clarity, because now your team is having to readjust and remake and reshape and all the rest of it, and they're going. And if you do that too quick, too often, then all of a sudden clarity suffers. So you want to get to the place where you're kind of balancing. Are we making excuses for something? Are we too loyal to something, refusing to change, and not changing fast enough, or are we changing too quick and now we're violating clarity in those things? Then I think there's a fine balance in that. But to me, again, to answer your question, is I watch for where I'm making excuses as to something's not working. Well, you are making excuses for numbers not being accurate, right, or being right. You're right. You start making excuses like, wow, it's just this time of year. Oh, wow, everybody's going through. Oh, it's just recession. Oh, well, it's just this. And you start making excuses for that. Wherever there's excuses, I'm going, wait, okay, is that the truth, or is that just, most of the time excuses are feelings? Is that the truth, or do we have something that is good and not great anymore, or is there a better way?
Thanks, Tim, I appreciate you asking that question. And Dustin on YouTube says that's a true story for him as well. So thanks, Dustin, for chiming in. Does anybody else have a question that they would like to ask Pastor Kelly today?
It's very cool. Dustin's watching on, where is he watching on?
He's watching on YouTube.
That is awesome. I love that. You'll be able to watch on Facebook and YouTube, LinkedIn, I believe, as well, which is very, very cool, and be able to chime in. So, hey, Dustin, it's great to have you. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, and Renee was watching on Facebook, but he couldn't get in on the video camera because apparently his hair wasn't done on time. But he does have a question for us. It's a long one. I'm not sure if it'll show completely on here. Let's see.
All right.
Some team members feel like no one else will want to do this, so I'll do it myself. And of course, this thing is going small on me and I can't read it. And meanwhile, people are waiting to be asked to serve. So how do we teach our leaders to grow their teams and teach their systems to people who might not be a part of these?
Such a good question. A lot of times we have the assumption that everybody enjoys what we enjoy and thinks like we think. And the reality is that God made each one of us extremely different. And I think it's absolutely crazy that there's people in this world that love numbers and spreadsheets and doing all the detail stuff. I was like, I don't want to ask anyone to do that stuff. That stuff is torture. That's torture for me, but there's people that actually come alive with that and love that. It's crazy. And there's other people that, I'm like, well, someone doesn't want to serve behind the scenes and do this kind of stuff. There's people that prefer to be behind the scenes and want to kind of be in the shadow and feel like they're contributing if they're involved in this way. So every single person is different. And so I think if we assume that that this is going to be painful for somebody else. I'll just do it myself. So no one else is going to want to do this. I think that is a big mistake. And I would communicate and train our team in saying, no, listen, there are people out there who want to do what you hate and who love to do what you hate. And there's people who hate what you love and would be terrified to do what you prefer to do. And so I think we need to have that regular conversation as leaders with our people and realize that there are people out there and just ask and do that. And there's certain jobs that, hey, there's people who prefer to clean behind the scenes and prefer to do spreadsheets and prefer to be locked in an office all day. Like there's people that prefer that. And man, let's find those people and be able to recruit and train and do that and simply ask. And I think you'll be surprised. I've been surprised multiple times. I know I had that thought when I was younger as a leader that, oh, no one's going to want to do this, so I'll do the mundane, terrible tasks. And then I realized people are like, why are you doing that? I want to do that. You took my job. I was like, oh wow, you want to do that? Yeah. Wow. Okay. It's amazing. So I think God made us, like Paul says in Corinthians, as different parts of the body. Like there's different parts, different functions. God made us to each play a role and to work together. And so I think we find people and ask people, and you'll be surprised at their response.
That's so good. Thanks, Renee, for getting clarity on that one too. That's a really good question. Does anyone else have anything else they'd like to do before we close today's meeting? Jen, you've been pretty quiet.
It's very loud over here, so I don't want to interrupt with the freezer making loud noises. I did have a couple questions, though. One, it was kind of piggybacking off of the conversation we were having with Tim, and just how do you identify whether there's outside factors that are playing into, it might not be a systems problem, but it might be, but there's outside factors such as seasonal things, COVID, just stuff like that. Like, how do you know it's actually a systems problem and diagnose that correctly as a leader versus like outside things? Like, how do you identify that?
Perfect. Great question. Definitely needs to be talked about. One of the things that I think is underestimated at the value of its importance, certainly in the church world, and I think a lot of times in the business world as well, is the whole idea of measurement and keeping accurate measurements. So the more accurate you are in your measurements and the more focused you are in your measurements, the better you're going to be able to discern between outside circumstances and whether different influences and whether you got a faulty system or where the problem really lies. So the proper way to do the diagnostic on where the problem really lies is to know, for instance, is this a seasonal thing? If you keep accurate measurements over the course of 2-3 years, you're going to be able to then go back and saying, hey, our attendance is down or our first-time shoppers are down, and it's July. What was July last year's numbers at? And how does this year's numbers compare to last July's numbers at? Not just how does this month compare to last month, but how does this current month compare to the trend of last month? And do we see a common trend year to year, and rather than month to month or week to week? And if we starting to see some common trends, like, for instance, in the church world in Canada, if we wanted to get depressed in July, that our attendance is much lower, and we got a big problem in July versus, June, then we're going to go, wait, we're going to make some mistakes, because the truth is people go on holidays in summer and attendance goes down. But if we compare, it's probably more accurate for us to compare this July to last July. That's more accurate. And we can evaluate and do a proper diagnostic that way. So that's one way. Another way to do that is to then compare, in the business world, your measurements and the accuracy of your measurements now to other companies that are, and find out from some of your competitors. This is where you can start seeing outside circumstances. Are we having, if we're running a coffee shop and other coffee shops are struggling at the same time, and we're finding out our measurements, then we're going, wait, is this an economy thing? Is this a seasonal thing? Is this a product? Like, what is the issue that's going on? So if you can now compare your measurements to other similar organizations and see if there's some trends going on, then you can know, again, properly diagnosing whether or not the problem is us, or whether the problem is the economy or our community, or wherever we can accurately define the problem, then we're going to be able to bring the proper solution. So I think the accuracy of our measurements, and then it's basically taking the measurements, the information, the data that you're getting from your measurements, and then doing proper homework and asking proper questions about the information that you just received. So if you get a number and going, ooh, this number is down, rather than just panicking over this number being down, why is this number down? And let's investigate thoroughly as to why this number, and what could be the possible, the potential problems as to why this number would be down, and what do we do with it. And then I would highly encourage every leader is, once you diagnose, ask your staff to help you diagnose, your volunteers to help you diagnose, and then communicate what the proper, the conclusion is as to why this is going on. Do we need to change, the system? Do we need to change the people? Do we need to change, something? Like, do we need to reevaluate things, or do we need to just hunker down because this is an economy thing? And how long is this economy thing is going to be? And we're going to hunker down for this season, and we're going to do this because we anticipate that it could be this way. This could be the trend now. And an example of some of those trends and what's going on is COVID has thrown a wrench into everybody's numbers and measurements and all of that, and going, well, that's not even close. But so what do you do? Well, what I did in all the midst of this, church attendance went down, we were locked down, all the rest of it going, what do I do? I had multiple conversations with lots of pastors, and going, what are you seeing? And I would ask measurement questions. I had conversations a couple of weeks ago at a pastor's conference where I was like, hey, you're in a different part of the continent. What percentage of people have returned? Is your attendance now compared to what it was pre-COVID? And they would give me a number, and I'm like, oh, okay, I would be able to assess my number with their number, and going, okay, maybe it's not just us, maybe it's something. And having conversations with 10 pastors who had a similar situations, like going, oh, this is probably not us now. This is probably circumstantial. And then I'd ask, probing questions like, hey, what are you doing about it? Like, what have you guys done? What has worked for you, or what isn't working for you? And you begin to ask those kind of conversations by investigating on the number that you know. And finding out what the real issue or the real problem lies. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that was a great answer.
Did you have additional questions, Jen?
No, just like a lot of it you actually answered in that. I was just going to ask, like, if you do find, because there's different types of things that can go wrong. Sometimes it's user error. Sometimes it is those other factors. So when you do identify it, what do you do, and what kind of questions can you ask to help identify it? But you answered that. So that was my question.
Perfect.
Okay, so we have time for one last question, and Dustin has actually asked it on YouTube, and he is asking, what are some tools that you are using to measure the data you are looking for?
Yeah, so tools that we use, Heidi, you'd be able to answer this one probably more accurately than me. But we track everything. So we have different tools for different systems that we track. So we track attendance through, most of our stuff is through Planning Center, and the data that we gather is that Planning Center is a church-specific software program, but basically it's creating data. Each one of our campuses, we have data that comes in Sunday afternoon where we track all of the attendance and from each one of the campuses and departments within that campus comes back, and then that gets entered into Planning Center, which is then tracked year over year, which kind of graphs it and does all that kind of stuff for us. Financially, I think we use QuickBooks and Planning Center, kind of combination of those kind of things that track that data. And we use Google Drive a lot, and we use dashboards. Heidi creates fancy, nice looking, much prettier than I would create dashboards where we can look at it. And honestly, we go through a lot of the measurements weekly in meetings. So the EOS system, the interview that I did with Eric Smith, he's an expert in EOS, which is Entrepreneurial Operating System, which does a great job at how to deliver on some of the measurements that you use. And so in a weekly meeting, we have with our staff, our exec staff, is we will then give an update weekly on the measurement numbers that we have, and then we have a set goal for the year of where that number should be, and then we report on it weekly, and if we're on track or not on track, so that we can every single week assess whether we're on track, not on track, and make adjustments quickly and efficiently as quickly as possible. So I don't know if that answers your question, Dustin, but some of the systems we use, like it's important to use the system that's going to track best, but that's also important to use, software and systems that are going to be able to communicate what you just tracked in a clear way then to your staff. And so for us, we use Google Drive and workable documents in Google Drive that our staff have access to and can be able to see, and then we bring them up in meetings. That's the communication part. But then the tracking part is, attendance again at Planning Center, and financials, QuickBooks, and volunteer stuff's on Planning Center. And that's software. Is there anything else? Anything else, Heidi, that you want to add to that?
We'll use the Trello for project management, and we're just investigating Monday.com right now for project management. But yeah, Google Sheets, we like Google Sheets because you can incorporate data from one sheet automatically into another sheet. But yeah, I think you pretty much got them all. And then Slack for in-house communication. But, yeah, and Dustin said you answered his question, so.
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay, so we are kind of out of time. It is 12:51, and we want to respect your guys' time as you get back to business. So we wanted to wrap up today. I just want to remind you to follow us on social media, and we have the link there. It's at Parallel Leaders. And subscribe on YouTube so you can get all the resources at your fingertips. We really appreciate everyone for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today. We hope this conversation was helpful to you, and thank you, Pastor Kelly, for leading us in building an effective system.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Parallel Leaders, where we help you target and evaluate your organization, leadership, or growth department under the microscope of 8 growth points to optimize your effectiveness as a leader.